Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for May 16th, 2020, recorded around 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, Invest 90L continues to get better organized, and the National Hurricane Center has now designated this as near 100% chance of development over the next 5 days, and we will likely be getting advisories sometime this afternoon or evening, probably around the 5 o'clock advisory time. We will start to get advisories from the National Hurricane Center, and tropical storm watches will likely be needed for portions of North Carolina by later today. The latest recon that was in there that is now heading back to their base did suggest that they did find a closed low-level center at this point in time, and the center continues to move generally off towards the north and east here, and is expected to do so over the next couple of days with a general north-northeast to northeast component of motion. The recon plane also did find an area of enhanced winds and wind turning just to the north of this here. So we do suspect that there is a low-level center here, and we will have another recon plane in there by later this evening. If you take a look here, this is the COD Meteorology website, and this is taking a look at the satellite loop here. You do notice that our old area of convection has really died off since earlier this afternoon, and we have seen a new area of convection form and maintain itself over the last several hours in and across this region, and that has been the focal point for where our new center has formed. And this is likely due to a combination of things. The old center was not getting enough of that moisture, and there's a lot of dry air still around the southern part of the storm. But to the north, there is a warm front just now basically off the screen. There is a little bit of a warm front that's lifting north of the system, and that is providing and paving the way for an occlusion process at this point in time where this might become secluded from the actual warm front and the isotropic lift, and this might be able to provide a fully tropical warm core system to develop across this area and move generally towards the north-northeast or northeast here over the coming hours and days. And this is going to do one or two things. This is either going to remain a subtropical or tropical depression or storm over the next couple of days. And again, this should provide and pave the way for some threats primarily to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Taking a look here at the Melbourne Florida radar site here, you do notice that our turning in the atmosphere has started to really occur over the last several hours here, and we have started to see more of that cyclonic turn in nature, and that has paved the way for what is believed and presumed to be a low-level center somewhere in this area out here. Now, again, the convection is waxing and waning. There is still a lot of drier air that's getting entrained into this, and if we go back to the satellite here, you do notice all of this dry continental air coming off of the Florida Peninsula here is still creating a wraparound effect, because obviously the winds in a low pressure center are moving generally in this sort of fashion, in a counterclockwise sort of fashion. And what's going to happen is this air, this drier state, more stable air from the Florida Peninsula is going to get wrapped around from time to time into this. And we'll take a look here in the model field in just a second on what that exactly looks like. If you take a look here at the 850 millibar vorticity, this is the spin in the atmosphere about 5,000 feet off the ground, and the higher you go in this contour, the stronger cyclonic shear you're getting. You do notice the area of highest cyclonic shear just off the Florida Peninsula there and near the Grand Bahama Island. Again, this is our little lobe of energy, but this is the warm front establishing itself to the north, and our system is somewhere in about here with the warm front draped to the north of that. And again, if this warm front can pull further up to the north, what that's going to do is seclude this system off and allow it to develop a true and tried warm core tropical system and acquire true warm core characteristics. And the National Hurricane Center does say that this will either be designated a subtropical or tropical depression later today, more than likely, if these trends continue. Again, convection will be waxing and waning across this area, so center reformations are always a certain possibility, especially with new storms or thunderstorms that are just going up in an established area. With a system that's just forming in an environment like this, we do expect multiple center reformations. So anywhere within this area could see a center reformation to really any sort of direction, really east, north, south, or west. We could see that direction change on where the actual center is. But for the most part, the recon has found a closed low-level center about 1,008 millibars at this time. Taking a look at the wind shear across the area, one of the big things that's been really prominent over the past really 24 hours is the market decrease in shear. If you remember when we first started talking about Invest 90L, we still had about 60 to 70 knots of shear blowing across the top of this thing in the Florida Straits. Now that has really begun to undergo significant change and weakening, and we're seeing generally light to a little bit of moderate shear across the area. Now there's still going to be some shear, and it's not going to be a perfect environment for 90L through its entire journey across primarily portions of the Gulf Stream. That's looking more and more likely now, but it will allow for some modest strengthening, and a stronger and a modest tropical storm is possible. It certainly could see at least maybe 50 miles per hour or so, especially in some of the outer bands and squalls, could see some of those higher end winds. One of the main things hindering the development of a significant system, though, is the sea surface temperatures and the upper ocean heat content. Here's a look at the map from the upper ocean heat content valid as of today. The higher you go into these yellows and greens, the higher in that warmer water goes down at depth. You're not really seeing that over the Bahamas. Now, the Gulf Stream is running about 26 to 27 degrees Celsius across almost most of the area, especially in around the vicinity of the Bahamas and the Florida coastline. As you get further up towards North Carolina and South Carolina, that drops off to actually right around about 25 to 26 degrees Celsius. Again, about 26 degrees Celsius is that magic number really for what tropical systems like to feed on for true warm core systems. However, other atmospheric processes will certainly be in play here, and that's why this could be a subtropical system instead of a fully tropical, because we're getting the atmosphere to help through different sort of lift mechanisms and that sort of stuff. Now, taking a look at the tracks, this is the 12Z model guidance data. We're still waiting on the 18Z guidance, and that has actually just now come in, so there we go. We do now have the 18Z model guidance data. Again, this is mainly suggesting more of a track towards the Outer Banks in North Carolina. We're starting to see that tightly clustered towards the Outer Banks in North Carolina as this finally begins to pull away from the Florida Peninsula and the Florida East Coast. Again, there's still going to be some rainy conditions over the next several days across portions of the Bahamas and the Florida coastline here, but for the most part, our main focus is over the next 24 to 48 hours across portions of the Gulf Stream and the Outer Banks of North Carolina. This is going to pose a threat towards those folks in the Outer Banks. So if you live in the Outer Banks in North Carolina, you certainly need to be paying attention. This is the time where you get your hurricane preparedness plan in place. Again, we are not expecting a hurricane. We are not expecting anything significant, but certainly some rain, some wind, maybe some flooding, beach erosion for sure, some surf, some higher surf, certainly as this starts to come in. Again, this is expected to become a tropical or subtropical storm within the next 24 hours or so. And then by the next 2 days, this is expected to pass just near or over the Outer Banks in North Carolina, potentially making landfall. And from there, the track becomes fairly uncertain. And again, some models still have this turning away before this gets to the Florida Peninsula. The UK Met model, which is a fairly respectable model, has a really good track record in storms and has this turning away from the Outer Banks and moving away. But most of the model guidance today has been coming into a better focus that the Mid-Atlantic states and the Outer Banks in North Carolina should be paying close attention and monitoring the progress of Invest 90L. And again, we will likely see tropical storm watches or warnings go up for portions of the Outer Banks later this afternoon or evening. Taking a look here at the model guidance data, almost every single model other than an unreliable model has this becoming a modest tropical storm with strengthening anywhere between about 50 to 60 knots. Again, the higher end echelon here is 60 knots, getting close to the borderline category 1 strength. Again, we're not expecting this to become a hurricane. There's just not enough time. But again, this could become a fairly respectable tropical storm over the next 24 to 36 hours, and even through hour 48. This could become a fairly respectable tropical storm, bringing some rain and wind across the area. Now, if we take a look here at the 18Z HORF model, this is the Hurricane Weather Research model. This is valid as of 12Z, or valid at 18Z or 1 o'clock this afternoon, so just about 2 hours ago now. And this is what we're looking at here. The established pressure is about 1,005 millibars, and we're taking a look at the relative humidity higher up in the atmosphere at this point, anywhere just above about 5,000 feet, going all the way up pretty much to about 30 or 40,000 feet, I do believe here. And obviously the greens here are going to support the higher moisture, and the browns are going to support the less moisture and more dry and stable air. And if we move this out really to about the next about 12 hours, you do notice that there is still one bit of a problem here. This is a fairly large area, and again, if we go back to the satellite loop here, you do notice that we do have a fairly large and broad circulation. This is not a really tight classical system. You do also notice here in the cloud fields that there is that cyclonic turning, indicating that we are seeing somewhat of a turn inside this area, and that is likely where our center of circulation is at this point in time. And so it's going to be fairly interesting to see what exactly is going to be occurring over the next couple of hours here. But you do notice that we are still getting some of that drier air trying to get itself wrapped up into the system. And if you do notice by hour 18, we have a little bit of a problem here. All of this dry air that's located to the north is not really getting shoved out of the way by a warm front located to the north. And because the storm is turning cyclonically, all of this drier air that is over here eventually is going to start to get pulled around and wrapped into the backside of the system. And if you do notice by hour 27, that drier air is starting to infringe on the outer portions of the system. And by the time we get to hour 33, just off the South Carolina coast, now we really have a problem. This drier air, this very stable, dry continental air, is beginning to get really entrained into the system. Now, whether the HORF model is actually correct in this analysis is still yet to be seen, but for the most part, as this is approaching the Carolinas, you notice this drier air is going to entrain into the system. So the storm is really going to struggle, and that's one of the main reasons why we're not expecting this to become a significant threat in terms of a wind maker. This is going to be a big rain maker, and if we go to the radar here, you do notice that we are getting a lot of rain and precipitation across portions of the Carolinas, the upstate, the upper portions near Myrtle Beach, and then Wilmington, North Carolina, the Outer Banks even, could see that potential for a very heavy rainfall event setting up with a potential landfalling tropical storm, and eventually the HORF has it making landfall at hour 51 here in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Again, we are really taking a look at that dry air, though, that's going to be in the bottom of the system and getting wrapped in from time to time. Again, this has been the case all throughout its life cycle, and even currently still now, it is still getting some of that dry, stable air from the Florida Peninsula wrapped up into the system. However, we have seen it become a lot better organized today, and Invest 90L is likely to get designated as a tropical or subtropical depression at 5 o'clock this evening or at 11 o'clock this evening at one of those two advisory points. This is Invest 90L here. Again, tropical storm watches will likely be required for portions of the North Carolina Outer Banks by later this afternoon or evening. I will be back likely with another video update going over whatever advisory comes out at 5 or 11 o'clock this evening. Hope you guys have a safe and uneventful day for the most part. Well, uneventful in a good way. And I will see you guys in a little bit.